Welcome back to Uncapped, a series dedicated to help my viewers improve at TFT using their games at their rank. I'm going to VOD review and go through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and figure out how to improve together. And if you want to submit your video, please email me coaching@frodan.com or submit on my Discord. Today's video is submitted by Politicess Music. Hello, Frodan. I'm a longtime fan of TFT, and I've been a massive fan of your quote, Into Deep, T-O instead of T-O-O, series. I saw that you started the Uncapped series, and I just had a game I would like to submit. I've been Diamond from set 1 to set 9, but I've recently made efforts to improve my gameplay and try to climb as much as I can. I hit Masters in 9.5, and I'm currently sitting around Masters 100 LP. Not bad. I recently had a game where I went 8th, and I would love feedback on how I can improve and what mistakes I'm making that I should be looking out for. I really like coaching Masters players in general because I think that they're so close to having their hands grasping the right topics, but they're usually missing like one or two key pieces that has that aha eureka moment. So let's go ahead and jump in it and see what Politicess has to offer for us today. All right, so we're starting off with loot subscription as the portal. Loot subscription often means that people are going to cap a lot higher, so the average strength of lobby is going to be much bigger. So try not to play these compositions that are known to try to squeeze into 4th and slide in there, unless of course you know how to cap them really high. So, you know, a comp, for example, like Punk is known to kind of cruise in there at 4th, but in, you know, high power level lobbies like Prismatics and whatnot, that ends up being a difficult thing unless you get like a Punk emblem. Right away, we skipped Tom Kench that had country, which I think is correct. We don't have a country to pair it with yet. And if we had like a good bruiser setup, maybe you could stall out for it. But I think that's a lot weaker if you don't already have the Katarina or Urgot, for example. We do have a Jinx with pairs across the board, which is really good. When you're picking something like Jinx as your headliner in the back line, you want to start thinking about your front line. And that's really good because we have a Taric pair and we have the Lilia pair. And I'm assuming we're going to sell to buy the Taric, which we do. So let's go right away and analyze the spot that we have right now. The reason why I partially like Jinx a lot was because we had a open bow and a glove. So at the worst case scenario, we have something like a Last Whisper to start slamming and try to accelerate the tempo. And then here's another element of it is that we have Prismatic Opener at 2-1. So right away, you have to start thinking about how you can play for a high cap ceiling, or you have to play for a high tempo start because you have to recognize that when a Prismatic lobby with loot subscription, it's possible for things to spike really quickly, especially if the early loot subscription at the beginning of stage 2 is going to be stuff like 2-star 1 costs or people get extra components. You have to be really willing to slam and play for heavy tempo. So with that in mind, things like Determined Investors is a little bit too slow. I think that this is much better on 3-2 when you can get to 40 gold pretty quickly, as opposed to, you know, 2-1 where you don't really have that start. Stationary Support 3 is also really powerful. It gives you a training dummy, which is an extra unit on the board. And also it gives you support items, which can give you really strong direction. You know, one of the more easy examples is like a Banshee's Veil to help get the melee carries rolling. Or if you want to play around like Locket and have a really strong front line and kind of utilize the stationary support, just make sure you always have front line. And so I like stationary support 3. Explosive War 3, I think, is also really good because it gives you a lot of resources and helps you snowball a lot of your tempo if you're able to grab it early. I'm gonna look up the data real quick, actually. The data really goes between stationary support and Spoils of War. Spoils of War is a lot better if you have like 2 stars already, and we do have Taric pair and Nami pair as well as a Lilia pair, so we're close to having a good Spoils of War board. But Spoils of War is also more fun and the win rate's really high, so maybe that's something that we should think about. So we choose to roll options 1 and 3. So it looks like we're dead set on Spoils of War. Shopping Spree is something that is getting more popular as the patch continues plays out because you could go for like some reroll comps or even store up for a big level 8 roll down. And we also have Roll the Dice. Wow, these are 3 of the strongest prismatic starts that you can have in the entire game. I think I would personally go for Roll the Dice here because I think it guarantees the most amount of strength, and Spoils of War 3 is not guaranteed because we don't have 2 stars. If we're in a situation where we have Spoils of War 3 and we have Jinx 2, but 1-star Guardians and 1-star Lilia and no 2 stars, that's going to put us in a really tough situation where we don't really get a lot of value. And right off the bat, Roll the Dice does give us a lot of strength, especially if we hit the 2 stars. In the worst case scenario, we could do like Roll the Dice and then make a Steadfast Heart with a glove and a vest and then get some momentum that way. Or we can go for, you know, Roll the Dice and then Last Whisper on our back line, put the Roll Dice on the front line, and then go from there. Shopping Speed is just really powerful because if you get a lot of econ going, it just helps snowball your game. And that 1 gold per round is worth a lot more now that economy and streaking has just been nerfed a couple patches ago. So in general, Shopping Speed is really powerful, and it sets up for really good level 8 all-ins where you can get things like that Heartsteel board or level 8 with the Pentakill or KDA Akali, whatever you're trying to play. So I would probably go for 1 and 3 here. Oh, wow. We actually just rip the spoils of war, and we get an item off of the loot subscription. And this happened without scouting. One of the big tips I'm going to give is make sure that you have maximum information before you make your first choice. We're not even scouting to see what the potential loot subscription reward is. You could click and see someone else's board and see what that reward is, and that might help influence our decision. In this case, having an extra component means that Spoils of War could theoretically be better because now we can make 2 items, and so that ends up being an okay pick. But we end up getting directly punished here because we don't actually have any 2 stars, and we have to sell our pairs in order to level, which makes our 1 cost odds even worse. So we leveled and we broke up our pairs, like we don't have Tarek pair, and now even if we did have pairs, we have a lower chance. We went from 75 to 55% odds. That's not a really good setup. Okay, so we level and we do get super fan ins, which is our strongest board right now. And we're not going to slam to start things off because it looks like we're going to win 4v3. So I do like that hesitation. And so this is okay to start things off. We're rewarded for playing our strongest board. We get an easy victory. Our opponent's making 20, so kind of nice. We didn't really scout to really get that information, but that's fine because it all worked out okay. I mean, if you don't scout, but you're able to play a strong board and win streak anyways, that's totally fine. I will say, if you're trying to make that next level to GM, you do want to start scouting and keeping tabs on your opponent. All right, so we find a Garen, and looks like we're thinking about double leveling, and this is an aggressive move to try and preserve our win streak. But we scout, and we don't see anybody else go to level 5 in the process either. And so this is one of those weird situations where I don't think we even need to level. We're not slamming items because we don't need to, but we also didn't even need to level either. And so now we kind of invest a lot of gold. But that's okay because, you know, we're trying to Spoils of War tempo, and we're trying to get the element of surprise. So far, it's all okay, but just keep in mind that just because people say you should try to preserve your streak and level doesn't mean you have to in this situation. It's still fine though, because Spoils of War does make up for some of that lack of gold that you get from your interest by streaking. It's just one of those things where you don't actually need to push these levels and break your interest gold if you don't, because the best case scenario is if you don't have the level to win, then you shouldn't. All right, so we're going up against a level 4 board now, and it's a little bit risky because they have 2 items slammed on a Tarek, and we have no item slam. This is one of the situations where not slamming might punish us. It's looking actually really, really close. Oh, the Nami actually fizzled and her ult didn't land on the Jinx. I don't know if that would have swung the fight completely, but it could have changed the outcome of the fight. But we do make 10 gold. That was a little bit of a risky situation, but hey, look, that was actually maximum greed paying off, because not spamming an item in that situation is a high risk and medium reward. Like, if you're able to keep that streak, that's good, but it doesn't necessarily decide your game. But the risk was very, very high. I personally, I think, would have slammed an item there, but it all worked out, so that's okay. And we have a sword last pick with 1 gold. I think that is a-okay to start things off. Center 2 in the shop. It is a straight up upgrade in terms of the tier for Jinx over the Senna. We likely took sword so we can make an AD item. Let's go ahead and actually think about this spot for a second here. Buying the Senna actually gives us the ability to upgrade the Jinx, and Jinx is going to fall off, and we don't have a guarantee that our next headliner is going to be something stronger than the Senna. Senna is one of the strongest 2-cost headliners to play around in stage 2 and 3, and maybe even the beginning of 4, and you already have kind of the setup for it. You can even put Infinity Edge onto Senna, and it's not even a bad thing. If you're like, okay, well, I don't want to slam like Giant Slayer or Shiv or something else, that's totally fine. And also, we get to get the bow off of this Jinx in case you want to, you know, redistribute it in any other place. Not to mention that this Senna gives you the opportunity to maybe lean into Senna reroll. So if you buy the Senna and you get more Sennas, you can actually just lean into the reroll comp as well. The argument against Senna is that she's expensive, and if you do end up winning, you could end up going for a win streak while maintaining gold and make your 20 gold threshold, right? Let's say you print 1 gold and you win the next round, then you make 20, and that helps you get to 30, 40, 50. And so that's an argument I can kind of understand. But since we're like committed to this win streak because we over leveled, remember, we have 4 out of 20 on 5, we actually really need to invest in this win streak, and it's so important. And the reason why I'm spending a lot of time on this is because I think many people don't really think very holistically about their stage 2 of how they're approaching both the impacts of the immediate as well as what happens on stage 2 that impacts later in the game. all decisions that we're making right now, which is how quickly we're making our interest thresholds, as well as whether or not we're protecting our streak, have a lot of impact onto whether or not we're able to be set up really well for stage 4. We also have Urgot in the shop. Urgot is just straight up better than Garen. So if we're trying to play for a best unit here and best spots, we definitely want to play Urgot here, in my opinion. And now we're going up against a stationary support with an Olaf 2, and we have a serious potential of losing here. Losing here is an absolute disaster. Oh my god. And so yeah, now we're in tough spot. We don't make 20. So this is actually the worst of both worlds. We didn't make 20, and our board didn't improve. We don't have Senna, and we also didn't hold things like Urgot to help, relay that into stage 3. The thing about it is that knowing that Urgot's really good on stage 2 and 3 is meta knowledge, and that's not to be confused with good fundamental knowledge. A lot of meta knowledge is like, hey, Senna 2 is like the best 2 costs that you can hit in stage 2 and 3. And then some patches, it's a different 2 cost, right? Maybe it's Aphelios, or maybe it's, I don't know, Garen or something like that, depending on how things are buffed and changed. That's all meta knowledge, and that's not fundamental knowledge. Fundamental knowledge is understanding why certain plays can be really good from certain spots and applying principles and rules to help you guide your decisions. So in the previous spot, the reason why we would double level is because we want to invest into our win streak, because Spoils of War wants to play from ahead, and you use things like the resources you print from Spoils of War to leverage that into a snowballing advantage. But now we just lost that advantage because we weren't playing around strongest board, and we weren't committed to that. I would rather we level to 6 and play a strong board in that spot and keep that streak than to be stuck at level 5 and kind of lose that streak. You might be thinking like, okay, well, snapping that streak's not big of a deal. It really is, because if we able to get that streak gold, that is an extra 1 here plus the 3 gold that we would get, but instead we reset to 0, and that doubles onto the PvE round for another 3 gold. So that's a huge amount of gold that we're missing already. Not to mention that we're not holding on to things like this Urgot pair, and it's a really tough situation for us to kind of swallow, because now instead of being like upwards to 50 pushing 60 gold, we're like, barely getting to 50 at that point. Okay, so we have a big cash injection. One thing that I'm noticing, and I think we're watching a spectated game because we don't have the POVs of how Politicess is like kind of moving the mouse cursor and scouting, but that's okay. But you notice that the little legend is not teleporting around. We're not scouting our matchups. We're not really thoughtfully positioning. We're not really necessarily trying to get the edge onto opponents based off of how we're actually well positioned into fights. And so that's something to think about as well. If you're trying to play these Spoils of War high tempo situations, you really need to make sure to maximize your positioning. We get a duplicator, which is actually really huge. And now we can use that very quickly to try and spike our board. And with the amount of gold that we have, I can foresee us pushing levels a little bit quicker as well. Okay, so let's look at our 3-2 augments. We got Teaming Up, Parting Gifts, and Team Building. Teaming Up is pretty decent as a silver, actually. You get 1 component and you get some gold. But in loot subscription, it's a little bit weaker because you get all that kind of stuff anyways. So the advantage of being up a component over the average silver player is less pronounced. If you get more resources, then that's just like less important to have 1 extra component compared to everyone else. Parting Gifts is interesting, but we have no items to slam, and we're still not slamming items. By the way, we still have just an open bow and nothing else. We're very, very greedy, and that's already another thing that is really interesting, is that we're trying to play tempo, but we're also greeding our components. Team building is also somewhat interesting if we ended up committing to like a reroll, but looks like we're trying to play open AD flex, so I don't think it's any of these right now. The one that I'll probably pick the most is Teaming Up. The one thing I will say is that Teaming Up gives us tier 3 champions, and we have a duplicator, so we have a Mordekaiser. We could theoretically hit Mordekaiser 2, and that also doubles for team building if we want a tempo on that line, but I'm not entirely sure that's what our game plan is, so it's kind of be a big shift in terms of our mentality of what we're trying to do here. Okay, so item grab bag is okay, but it's one of those situations where I think it's really awkward on 3-2, because if we get AP items, we don't really want AP items, and so it's a little bit awkward here on 3-2. Silver Veil is pretty good actually, but Young, Wild, and Free, playing from ahead, you get first pick, you get 2 gold, and that carousel pick could be really huge. Depending on if we're hitting things like a Heartsteel breakpoints or a really important 5 cost. Young, Wild, and Free from ahead is generally really, really good. So I think this is a solid pick. And so now we're starting to upgrade our board. We're at 16 out of 36 on our EXP. So we're just going to push. And I think 30 gold is kind of that sweet spot, which is really good. We can very easily make 40 if we want to sell a bunch of our board. And also we can kind of get that. The last 1 and 2 gold that you make from 40 and 50 are a lot easier to make back as opposed to starting from 10. So Generally, if you can get to level 7 around 30 gold, it's a really good spot to be economically. We are still not slamming items, and at this point it's starting to frustrate me a little bit because we just had this bow. I think Runan's Hurricane has been a good slam for a few rounds now, where we could have like a really powerful Jinx convert off that extra AD. And it's one of those things where I understand why we're not doing it, because we want the bow to be red buff and we want this cloak to also be a even shroud. But even if you can justify it, we still have these components right here where we can actually slam a tier and a chain vest to make a protector's vow to just make our front line even better. Even if it's not like the best item possible, you eventually need some tank units to have defensive items. You can't just purely build offensive and utility items only. And if you get caught in this mix of like, okay, I want this tier to be blue buff, and I want this vest to be, you know, an Edge of Nights, and I want this cloak to be even shroud, and I want this bow to be red buff. You need 4 components to make that all happen, and you're telling me that the earliest you're going to be able to get it is the end of stage 3 if everything perfect drops. It's not going to be good enough, so I highly recommend slamming. Okay, let's actually pause here at the carousel and kind of analyze the situation as well, because when you have Young Aladdin free, you actually have an amazing amount of choices that can boggle the mind. The first thing you want to think about is what is the component that best spikes my board, and it is completing an item on Jinx. So you're looking at like a red buff because we've been greeting our bow so long. I'd be very surprised if we, you know, grab a sword and go for GS after all this. So Zac with a bow looks pretty good, but there's also a Zed with a belt, and I think that also is a really good candidate because that helps get you even shroud. And in reality, you can actually have a lot of different forms of anti-heal, but there's only 2 forms of armor reduction, and even shroud vastly outperforms things like Last Whisper. And I actually think that the Zed here is slightly better than the Zac with the bow. Everything else doesn't look that good though. Okay, so it looks like we go for a bow on the Zac. That's okay. That's pretty good. I think the Zed with the belt is even better, personally. Also because I think that we're lacking a little bit of DPS, and Zed is just good as a 1-star unit, even on your board, to get some power, because we're putting everything on the Jinx in order to scale. And a lot of ways you can think about this is what is the most mandatory thing for my composition. And the reality is, yes, anti-heal is very important, and red buff is very good for making sure that you have consistent amount of DPS with the anti-heal. The even shroud is even more important. Not to mention that we still don't have any frontline items, and we have a Pantheon too, and giving items to these 2-star units is going to be really, really important. We're also not taking in Heartsteel here, which is, I think, okay, because, you know, in the end, we're trying to see if we can play for our streak and get a bunch of these kills and wins. Oh, wow. The chest gives us Viego and a Blitzcrank. And hey, we ended up winning because we didn't take Heartsteel in, so it all ended up okay. It is worth noting that we're going to get delayed Heartsteel cash outs, so it's going to be less of a payoff. And again, we're not like going to be scaling nearly as fast, but I think that's okay. We end up selling Blitzcrank and Viego, and we're still not really itemizing. We're still not really scouting. I think at this point, I would very much commit the vow, and I think that by not slamming here, we're jeopardizing our 3 streak by like a lot. We end up losing this fight, and this is one of the downsides of not playing Heartsteel, right? The upside is we get to play a stronger board, but the downside is now that we kind of lost, we kind of wish that we had Heartsteel. And this is something to keep in mind. Like, Jinx already has fallen off, and by not playing like a Heartsteel board to relay into stage 4, we're 1 round slower. And that ends up kind of adding up across the board. A lot of the things that we did this game are like, we're just going to be 1 or 2 rounds behind. By losing our streak, not once, not twice, but 3 times, we're a little bit behind. We don't have nearly as much gold to roll as we would like. Like, if we actually were able to kind of get everything together, play our strongest board, find a way to streak, we would be upwards of 70 gold right now at level 8, and we would be able to kind of go for a big roll down and save our gold to go to 9 while being in a good position. By not slamming items, we're preserving a little bit less HP, which might give us less wiggle room in the future, so on and so forth. But I do like this pre-level to 8 because it's a natural interval, and also we get best 4 cost odds. Let's go ahead and watch the roll down here. We get more gold, and we're not rolling. We're going to buy this Akali. Okay, so right away, this is too much for me. Like, you need to roll. Are we just going to give up all our HP? Okay, so we're not rolling. We're not rolling. This is a really weak board that we're going up against. Twin Terror, 1 costs, or 1 stars, rather. Twin Terror, 1 stars that we're going up against. So this is actually really lucky matchmaking, but not rolling here, I just don't understand. I just don't understand, because let's think about it from the perspective of the macro of the lobby. In a lobby like this, you have to assume that you're not the only Heartsteel player, And so if you're not rolling, you're going to make your life difficult because other people are taking out all the 4 costs and whatnot. This could only really be justified if we were like scouting, but it doesn't look like we do a lot of that. And also, what are we trying to greed for? Like, what's the purpose of greeding? Are we trying to like let everyone else pull all the other 4 costs out of the pool? It doesn't look like that. And also, are we trying to go straight to 9? I don't think we can get to 9 on a board like this. We're going to be taking huge amount of damage every single round. In stage 4, if we take like a medium to large size loss, it's going to cost like 12 to 15 HP. So if you get to level 9 in stage 5-1, you're going to be at like 20 HP. If we even get there, that is a little bit too dicey for me. Taking a look at augments. I love combat augment here. We have so much resources. We definitely don't need resources. Armistice is what looks like to be the best because we're playing around a Akali at the moment. And I think that utilizes the augment the best. Also, I think we could take Know Your Enemy if we're going to be playing kind of this like big spread out trait tree. So I think either of those are okay. I think Best Friends is a little bit most awkward here. But honestly, I could see any combat augments. We're rolling all of our combat augments. Okay, so we skip Capricious Forge and Return on Investment. So at least our decision making is consistent in the fact that we are trying to go to 9 and we're not rolling. So Return on Investment also would have been okay, because if we had chosen to roll here, like one of the arguments could be I want to have the max amount of gold to roll on 4-2. That also would have been good, because if you get a Jazz board synergy, having a Tactician Crown is really, really good. We're not really positioning our Akali optimally, but it ends up working out okay. In general, you want Akali to start right around here, because then she would shoot to the corner. And with red buff, that actually matters because you want maximum surface area of like her applying the red buff. Because if she just starts applying from halfway, you're not going to get any units on this side of the board, for example. Although I guess like, you know, maybe that ends up being the case in a lot of situations. But in general, you want this Akali to be on the edge. In fact, you could probably put Akali where the Lilia is, because if you put her right around here, then she ends up just dashing anyways immediately and dropping aggro. So she's fine because you can heal up. Man, we are really greeding this, aren't we? Also, I just noticed while trying to analyze everything, we slammed Crown Guard onto our backline unit instead of our frontline units because we want the AP. That's also like very, very greedy. Somehow, despite the odds, we have won a round though, and that ends up being, I guess, a decision that pays off. Okay, so we made it to 4-5. I will say one thing. The combination of the Executioner with the Vex and the Akali has been nice for DPS, and we're still getting Heartsteel value. We're selling our Vex, which is one of the better parts about our board, and we're selling our Akali, and we're trying to go for 5 Heartsteel. Oh, I see. So we're trying to go for even more greed. Okay, finally there's a board that we're going up against that isn't very weak. We have KO3 with a Radiant Hand of Justice. I gotta admit, I feel like the past couple boards lulled us into a false sense of security. This is a full 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 unit loss. We didn't kill a single unit, so now we just lost a lot of HP. But that's okay. We're about to cash out, and we're gonna go to a level 9, right? So the risk and reward has paid off. Once more, we've taken a high amount of risk, and it has paid off. We get a ZZ Rot. Okay, we have Poppy. That's one of the best headliners that we can hit. Mosher Poppy is not the best because we want emo. It just fits really nicely into the trait structure because now you have 3 Mosher and you probably play the Yorick for 4, but you know, generally the emo is good for the Jazz. And we're still not rolling. Are we trying to fast 10 here? Okay, so I understand why we're not rolling. We have an opportunity to double dip on interest, but that is way too greedy. It's way too greedy because we need to actually start rolling and improving our board, and we're getting balanced budget anyways, and all we're preserving right now is like 2 to 3 gold. Let's say we roll to 30 and we improved our board. We may have preserved like, you know, 2-3 units worth of HP. So we'd be at like 4 to 6 higher health, and we have, you know, 2 to 3 less gold. At this point, you have to start thinking about what's actually worth the trade-off. If you go from 50 to 30, you lose 2 gold, but you could get 6 HP. That is absolutely worth. We're still not rolling. Okay, let's roll. Okay, we're rolling. Finally, man, this is stressing me out. Okay, so we're rolling. We hit MF2. We hit a Jhin and a Kiana. We're playing 5 Heartsteel. We didn't get Lucian in. We made a Heartsteel Emma. We're going for 5 Heartsteel. Okay. You might be the greediest player I've seen in a hot minute. Like, what is this? Okay, we need to keep rolling here. We hit Ezreal 2. We skip Poppy as our headliner. We're also rolling with Thresh in, and Thresh is one of the weaker 4 costs to play around. Yes, you know, it's a 2-star unit, but Poppy is almost exactly what we're looking for. It even is the perfect trade because we got Emo, so we can take the Jazz in. We need to get Lucian in. if anything, having this Heartsteel emblem gives us the excuse to drop things like Cassante. So I think the big thing to think about in these kinds of spots is what are some of the weakest units that don't contribute to my team. Cassante doesn't do anything right now, and so that is something that we could have taken out. We also have a serious lack of DPS. We have Ezreal as our primary carry, but we don't have someone that's adding a secondary source of damage like Lucian or even the Zed. The Zed's not being bought in the shop as well. We finally tech in the Lucian, which I think is important. And now we kind of see like why the Heartsteel emblem like doesn't really do anything. If anything, maybe we could have gone for like an emo emblem. We could have also gone for a pentakill emblem to play around this Yorick. And so a lot of people will look at this board and say like, man, this was an eighth. Like, how do people get all the Heartsteel stuff? Okay, so this board is starting to come together. We have Ezreal 2. We finally get the Lucian in. We got some damage in. Jazz gives us a lot of extra stats here. And hey, we get an extra component. You never know if things like the Heartsteel emblem could have been some like emo as well, which would have been really, really nice. But our front line's really good. That's the good news. The bad news is we still kind of need a secondary damage source, and we're at 1 life. Taking a look at the carousel, I would want a Lucian item or a Yorick item. And I'm looking at like Deathblade, I guess here is the only thing that makes sense. TG is also acceptable. You can put TG on a Lucian. In these late game situations, you need a dual carry, and you just can't really get it done with Ezreal 2. And I think the dependence on Ezreal so far has kind of shown why a lot of people are saying Heartsteel is not just about Ezreal. It's actually about the cash house and the holistic approach of how you're building the board. EDM Zed, and we get a Tactician's Crown. This is so insane. We just skipped Zed headliner. Why? We could have just given him Thief's Glove. We have a Thief's Glove, which is actually perfect. Oh man, we're still playing a Thresh headliner. Our damage didn't really spike, and we added a 4th Guardian, which is good, but our front line was already the best part about our comp. We have 2-star across the board, and we have a Zizirod, and we have the Alawi, but we just really kind of lack that damage. Okay, it ends up paying off. No, oh my god, we lost. Are we dead? We're barely alive. Okay, we find Lucian 2. That's good. We definitely make Lucian 2. I would sell the Amumu and make a Lucian 2. I'd rather play 2 Yoriks. We're too tied to synergies at this point. Synergy, the 4th Guardian here doesn't really matter. Amumu 1 for a 4th Guardian for 40%, I believe, is the shielding is not really worth it compared to just playing even a 2nd Yorick. And now we're going up against 3-star Twin Terror, and 3-star Execution Twin Terror does have enough DPS to get past our front line. And oh gosh, our Ezreal just got tagged, and we died. We went 8th. Oh man, this was a nasty 8th. I'm just rewinding. Okay, so I've taken a minute and decided to reflect on what we could improve. Lesson number 1 that I think we need to focus on is if we're going to play for streak, we have to commit to playing best board, slam items, and make sure we preserve that streak. 2-5 when we lost. This is a pivotal round. We could have improved by putting Urgot in and slamming items, and even making Urgot as our tank, or upgrading and committing to the strongest board by playing Senna and putting items onto Senna. 2, we did a really good job focusing on economy, and you actually even spotted a play that I didn't even really think about, which was can we agreed and play around Vex and Akali as our carries, and then like anchor around some of these units and items that we have already. I think that was really smart because you end up having like items that are good for Akali with red buff and Infinity Edge, and you itemize around a Vex, which was pretty clever because that was the free unit that you got off of loot subscription. But you need to commit and roll. We're just being way too greedy, and we're not respecting the tempo of the lobby. Because when you're playing loot subscription and you hit Prismatic, you have to expect that people are eventually going to get strong. And there's even a gold augment at 4-2, which can spike a lot of people's boards. And we're not really scouting enough. That is point number 3. Where in general, we're not. It doesn't seem like we're scouting. I kept track of whether or not we even looked at other POVs, and we only did it a few times throughout the game. And that is actually the key to unlocking whether or not you're able to evaluate if you should roll or greed. And last but not least, even when we did roll, we were not really prioritizing trying to get a secondary carry. We were purely thinking about Ezreal, and we were also thinking about our headliner improperly, because the thing that was lacking about our composition was damage. And if you do play Poppy, part of the reason why people like to play Poppy is because she also is a really good tank, but she can also crank out damage, and you can build around her traits really effectively. In this case, Thresh only offers one thing and one thing only: crowd control, and it wasn't good enough for our board to actually scale up. We hit so many of the things that were nice about our comp, but we never actually end up getting a secondary damage source that was reliable. By the time we stabilized, we only had 1 life, and we queued into people who had really capped out boards with like Twin Terror 3 and Executioners, and that's why we died. All right, that was a really rough 8th, but I think we learned way more from our 8th places than some of the Hyrule firsts where we could do no wrong. because in that game, there were so many different corners we could have optimized. And I think if we go back and watch it again, there probably could be even more things that we could talk about, but couldn't fit in this video. Thank you so much to Politicess for sending in this VOD. It's not easy to subject yourself to the judgment of others, especially when you go 8 disastrously as what we just watched with so much gold. But I think losers improve. And remember, LP is fake. It's all just a number that we arbitrarily assign value to. We don't need to put our own self-worth and value into a number on the screen. TFT is a game about ever improving and ever trying to strive for excellence. And I think you're on the right path. Thank you to Politicess for submitting again. If you want your chance to be featured for a coaching video, please submit your videos on YouTube in good resolution to coaching@frodan.com. Please don't send me like a giant WeTransfer link or like a download file. I don't want viruses potentially. And also, please send a little bit about yourself with a bio, because some people just drop the VOD with no context, and I don't think I'm gonna pick those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.